Here. Say aye.
Aye.
Motion to, so today we're here to take public input on the maximum property tax levy for pay 2019. These would be the taxes that people would be paying next year. And so to that end, I'm going to open the public hearing. If you would like to speak to the board, we have a sign-up sheet. We have a sign-up sheet right here. If there's anyone who still wants to sign up, there's still a sheet. Thank you. And folks have 1 minute to speak. Please, when you come up, give us your name and your address. I'm going to start with Patrice Howard. And on deck will be Syed Omar, and I apologize if I have mangled your name. I apologize.
Hi, my name is Patrice Howard. Address is 3327 Emerson Avenue North, Minneapolis 55412. Good evening, Chair and Council members. My name is Patrice Howard. I'm representing Brooklyn Center Community Schools as the Director of Community Schools and Engagement. And again, I'm also a resident of Minneapolis. Brooklyn Center Community Schools is the first full-service community schools district with over 100 programs and partnerships that respond to the needs of the whole child by helping to reduce barriers to learning. We began implementation of this model in 2009 and have produced positive results ever since, including increased graduation rates, on-site access to mental health and medical supports, family engagement practices such as increased food support for families and leadership opportunities, as well as enrichment programs for all youth. By welcoming community members as partners in school involvement and decision-making, we are better able to reduce access to barriers by responding to the achievement and opportunity gaps through co-located and coordinated service of delivery and supports coordinated services of delivery that supports student success. This is a proven model of success with over 5 years of decade, and I've had the opportunity to work with this model for 8 years. And I've witnessed the accomplishments. I've also provided and willing to continue to provide technical assistance to community organizations as well as school districts. Thank you to the City of Minneapolis for considering this model, and thank you to all of the full-service community school supporters.
Thank you. Saida, did I mangle it again? I apologize. And on deck, I have Jose Aviar. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Syed Omar, and I'm parenting liaison at Jefferson Community School. I'm here to support full-service community schools, and I am in support of the levy and the work being done by the park board and the city to help our students. We want our students to have more support in their education, and the money in this levy would be good to start making that happen. More than half of our students at Jefferson Community School are ESL population, and we're struggling to find support for them. Also, we have a lot of students who have emotional and behavioral issues, and often we struggle to find right resources for them. Full service community schools give us a chance to encourage parents to partner with us and for us to listen to them, because they are the ones who know their kids the best. We will also help students to succeed in school. It will be good for everyone in our school and our community. I appreciate the work being done in this issue, and I hope the board supports the levy. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your comments. Just to be clarifying for folks, we are here today to talk about the city levy. The school board levy is a separate levy done by the school board that is separate from the City of Minneapolis levy. We are happy to hear from everybody, but just understand we will not be voting on the school board levy. We will only be voting for the levy that funds police officers and firefighters and traffic lights and things like that. So I have Jose Aviar. Again, I apologize if I am mangling the names. And I have Shawn Layden on deck. I'm doing my best with your handwriting, people.
Hello, my name is Jose Riga. I'm the Education Justice Organizer for Navigate Minnesota. But I'm here today not just as an organizer or an educator. I'm here today also as an alumni and a person who used to attend Minneapolis Public Schools since the age of 5. I currently have students attending MPS schools, family members, and I myself used to be an educational support professional for MPS. That being said, I know too well the reality of having underfunded and underserviced schools. As a city and as a state, we have the responsibility to ensure that all our youth and kids have an equal opportunity to learn and succeed, but we have not been doing that. We've had the opportunity to change things, but have not done so in the past 20 years that I have known MPS schools. Our schools continue to be underfunded and underserviced. Our kids continue to be marginalized, and many disparities continue to exist. However, we have the opportunity to change this, to push towards full-service community schools that will meet our students' needs, that will result in higher graduation rates, that will engage and support parents, and that will retain and empower educators, teachers, and individuals that work with students. So I ask you to please put our future first and to not wait another 20 years for change to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. That's Shawn Layden, and on deck, Mr. French.
Hi, Shawn Layden, 2552 Garfield Avenue South, apartment 102, Minneapolis. 18-year Minneapolis resident, live in Whittier. I'm here to support the 5.7% park board levy request and want to maybe shed a little context on what we've heard so far. With the support of this levy, we can build on the existing partnerships that exist between the parks and schools. And one thing that partnership represents is coming together at shared parks and school sites. We've got almost 20 of them around the city, and many of them in underserved areas of the schools and parks. And so we're very excited about the conversation that the park board has been having with the school board in the spirit of the MOU that exists already. And so what we're looking at is a increase in youth funding for the park board to enter into that partnership around the model that we're talking about. And what's important about that is our kids in Minneapolis come and they get off the bus at a school, and then after school, they go right next door into their park. And we should be looking at how do we work together to make sure we're coordinating services across entities. And I want to thank Mayor Fry for his leadership on this issue and support thus far, and encourage support of this Board of Estimate and Taxation to support the Park Board's 5.7% levy request.
Thank you. Mr. French next, and then Justin Killian.
How you guys doing today? My name is Londell French. I am a Minneapolis Park Commissioner, but I'm also a longtime employee of Minneapolis Public Schools, and I've worked in the parks for almost 20 years as well. When I ran for office, I talked about how our parks are the backyards of our neighborhoods. And I think that can be a lot more than just our backyards. That can be our meeting centers. That can be places where we deal with some of the everyday issues that some of our students face, whether that be homelessness or highly mobile, whether that be coming to school with clothes that aren't clean. Maybe we can have a laundry service at these places to make it more conducive for kids who are having a hard time in the educational process do better. So I'm asking for you guys to support the 5.7% for the park board is asking, and I want to thank Jacob Fry for his leadership in this issue, and thank you guys for listening to what we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Killian next, and then Mr. Coco.
Thank you. My name is Justin Killian, and I live at 816 Portland Avenue South. But I'm also here today as a representative of the 86,000 educators that Education Minnesota represents across the state of Minnesota. That includes the wonderful teachers and paraprofessionals here in Minneapolis Public Schools. I work in the policy department at Education Minnesota, and a few years back we released an important paper about how successful community schools can be for a neighborhood or for a community that is struggling. For those reasons, we continue to support this model. One thing I wanted to bring to your attention is I know that you pointed out that you said that we're not here to vote on the school board levy, but what we're trying to do is build coalitions where we're connecting communities with schools, because schools are vital parts of our community. In 2018, this year, there was a social science study released in which Green said Poverty, housing, and healthcare are things that greatly affect the way our students learn, and we can't expect schools to fix this all on their own. We have to do things to bring partnerships to them, much like the partnerships we see in places around the state, including our neighbors over in St. Paul, who are doing some interesting things with the St. Paul Park system and their Dayton Bluff site. I'm not going to bore you with many more statistics, but I will leave you with one, which is that for every dollar invested in a full-service community school, a community will see $10 to $14 in productive revenue for that area. So I highly encourage you to support the levy.
Thank you so much. Mr. Calgill, and then on deck, Augustana Machado. Again, my apologies if I messed that. Hey, I'm trying.
John Elko Gil. I live at 1910 First Avenue South. President Becker and members of the board, thank you for having me today. I am here to speak in support of the 5.7% levy request for the park board in a time when the state and federal leadership is not coming through for investing in our young people. It's really time for our city and our local government to step up. And I must say that I am very happy that the mayor has indicated his interest in providing a down payment on investment in youth services. This is a program that has worked throughout the country, especially on the West Coast. Wraparound Schools is wildly successful, and it is just so critical that we start the ball rolling on this. And thank you so much for your support and consideration of this levy increase.
Thank you so much. Augustana Machado, and then the last person I have on my list is Greg Sweet. And if there's anybody else who would like to speak, please come up and sign up, because my second to last person.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ayana Machado.
I tried.
It's okay. It's all good. I'm a resident of St. Paul, so I'm here as an ally for Hennepin County and Minneapolis Public Schools. I'm a community organizer, activist, artist, and a mother who is committed to education for liberation. I'm also the coordinator of Achievement Plus at John A. Johnson Elementary, which is a full-service community school, a model which I firmly believe supports the social, emotional, mental, and physical health and well-being of our students and community of the east side of St. Paul. More districts should absolutely consider a full-service community school approach as a way to offer a holistic approach in our communities. So I absolutely thank you for allowing me the time here to speak on behalf of a full-service community model, and believe that this model definitely can lead towards education for liberation approaches and building a holistic approach for not only the students and families in the school, but also for the community at large. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Last on my list is Craig Sweet. And so if there's anyone else after this, please come and sign up. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome.
I'm here today to speak in support of the levy. And so Craig Sweet, 3152 46th Avenue South. I am a resident, but I am also a coordinator in St. Paul in a full-service community school. So Achievement Plus is a program, a collaboration between the Amherst H. Wilder Foundation, for whom I work, and St. Paul Public Schools, and we operate in 3 schools there in St. Paul, and this model has worked. We have existed for over 20 years there, and we have seen good neighborhood collaboration, and we're all about partnerships. So we are about bringing and pulling people together, having neighborhood organizations working towards the betterment of all of our students, families, and the broader community. And one of our sites, Dayton's Bluff, is actually physically attached to a St. Paul Parks and Rec location. So there's great collaboration and communication that happens between the site and the school on a daily basis, but particularly if we think about out of school time. So days when the school is closed, the park, the rec center is open. When summer is on and school is out, the park and the rec center is open. So it is a great way for our kids to always just know that they're going to one destination and that they have their needs met. So I certainly encourage you to support the levy, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. All right, going once, going twice. All right. Mr. Qualley, I'm not going to close the public hearing until after the presentations, correct? All right.
That's correct.
Thank you. Finance officer report on the budget. Is that up next then? Thank you. Mr. Ruff. And thank you, everybody who came down here all the way to City Hall. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. So easy to park.
I park illegally.
I was semi-illegal until I got here.
President Becker, members of the board, I'm Mark Ruff. I'm the city's chief financial officer. I'm going to quickly walk through the mayor's recommended budget and just want to make sure that it's clear that this is what was in the mayor's presentation. There will be some differences in percentages for park board than what has been adopted, as I understand it, by the park board itself. So I will primarily focus then on the city expenditures and happy to answer any questions either along the way or at the end. I know that Mr. Innermill, our budget director, who does a great job, has had 2 presentations in front of our city council already, and so there's a substantial public record. And if anyone is interested in more information, certainly you can go to our website, and on the budget website can find the copies of this document, as well as on the city's website, the YouTube channel for the city that has the budget presentations. I'm going to focus primarily on what has changed. We all know that we can play with percentages and make percentages look better or worse. And one of the tough parts about budgets is we have both operating and capital, right? So money that we spend once and then money that is really more ongoing. And so this budget, excluding independent boards, and again, this excludes the park board in these calculations, is in terms of the spending numbers that I'm going to give, as well as excluding other smaller boards that the city is involved with, is a budget of $1.55 billion. Seems like a large increase, but most of the increase is related to 2 one-time expenditures. The gray area on the right is the city's investment in a new consolidated office building, and then also in the lighter blue in the middle of that bar is the mayor's proposed one-time expenditures for affordable housing. And so that's what is driving a large amount of that increase. We try to break it down more in terms of the general fund. So that what I gave you was the overall larger city budget that includes sewer, water, what we call enterprise funds. It includes the convention center, Target Center, which we call special revenue funds, and other associated funds. That's the overall city budget. Our general fund are our basic city services. That is growing by 5.6%. So how does that break down in terms of that percentage increase? Well, the dark blue is just the regular, what we would just call inflation on current service levels, or what we did yesterday continuing till tomorrow. That's 3.5% of that increase. The 20-year street plan has an annual increase built in over the next several years of 0.6 to 0.7, and so that is the gray area of the city's contribution to the capital for the parks and the streets. And then 1.3% are the mayor's additional items that are to be spent overall.
Mr. Ruff, before you go on,
Sure.
What is the increase for para? Is it
Sure.
new
So
legislation, or is that?
it is new legislation. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
asking. So as you may have heard, the governor signed. There was not much that was passed out of the legislature this year, but one thing that did come together was an agreement for both state and local pension funding for employees, in particular affecting our police and fire pension. And so there is both an employee and an employer additional contribution to make those funds more solvent over the next few decades. So these are not our closed pension funds. These are active police and fire employees. And so we have an increase in the 2019 budget. We will also, and that's just under $1 million. We will also have an additional increase, again, driven purely by just the contributions from the employer for that sustainability of the pension funds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The other funds I mentioned, the increases are listed here. Again, capital projects because of some exceptional projects that we have going on. Otherwise, it's pretty much business as usual. The enterprise funds show a little higher blip. We are continuing to invest in our water treatment facilities up in Fridley and Columbia Heights. Those are also once-in-a-generation improvements. Those are both for the filtration and also for our electrical improvements for that enterprise that serves not just the city of Minneapolis, but several other communities as well. As when you go to the airport, you are drinking Minneapolis water. As the board is familiar with, we have several breakdown of levies that show up in our levy format. I will quickly walk through each of these categories, show you what's behind the increases. So the general fund levy, the mayor's recommendation, $201 million. That's a 6.28% increase. A good chunk of that is because of, as you saw, the spending did not increase by 6.28%, so the levy has to go up more because our other revenue sources, specifically local government aid and primarily, are flat or less than inflation increases. There is a slight increase in some of the other revenues. We have raised building permits and some licenses. We are also earning more interest because the Federal Reserve has increased interest rates, and that helps our short-term investments. And then we are using some fund balance, some one-time expenditures, which is contributing to our overall expenditures.
And liability proceeds?
Long-term liability proceeds is a fancy term for just bond proceeds or our debt proceeds, so that contributes to an increase as well. Here's some more specifics. Again, certainly details in Mr. Intermill's presentations on what each of these things are, but the themes within the mayor's recommended budget are certainly he and the council have a significant emphasis on affordable housing, and that can take many forms that are listed here. Public safety, obviously another area of key concern, as well as growth. I will highlight especially the 5 fire personnel. We are continuing to see increased medical calls. The fire department is working to respond as diligently as possible, and we are increasing in population. And with the increase in population, there are increases in investments that are necessary. Other emphasis in terms of economic inclusion and equity within our core functions, and also the parapayments that we just mentioned. Park Board, I will skip over and talk specifically about bond redemption. So in addition to the transfers from our general fund, we also have some increases in our bond redemption, which is essentially our principal and interest payments, or our debt payments for the debt that we issue. And the increases in the bond redemption are directly related to the 20-year Parks and Streets agreement. In addition to current employees, we also have what are called closed pension funds. Those are where we had, those have been closed, meaning there are no new employees. In fact, I think all but, if not all, but all but one are, these closed pension funds are no longer current employees. These people are all retired. There was legislation approximately 7 to 8 years ago that many of you who have been around the city are familiar with. We continue to levy to make payments to para to supplement the costs of benefits for those closed pension funds. Those payments go through 2031. There is a projection right now in the state budget forecast of a reduction in aid that we are currently, and the Park Board isn't currently, and the School Board isn't currently enjoying for a certain set of employees that are not police and fire, but are more general employees. And that's commonly referred to as Murph. And so we are increasing the levy to anticipation of that aid cut. We do have some cash that we will be able to offset if that aid cut does occur. We will certainly be working at the legislature in concert with the Park Board and the School Board to help make sure that the impacts of that change are well known by the legislature.
Mr. Riff, which of the closed funds actually has active employees still? Murph?
At the last time at least 2-year-old information, I think there may have been one police officer who was still active.
I just thought I'd ask.
Yes.
Thank you.
That probably is no longer the case. We make contributions to the Municipal Building Commission, which is the group that is a joint, legislatively established joint powers between the city and the county that operates this building. People forget that 40% of this building is actually occupied by the county. I use occupied in the sense of a tenant occupation and not necessarily anything that is adversarial. Certainly have a great partnership with the county on this building, and we make rent payments essentially for this building. I have to choose my vocabulary very carefully in today's world, and sometimes fail, so I need to have a different term. Funding for your body, the Board of Estimate Taxation, and staff, as well as expenses for this operation, is included in a separate levy. And then Another legacy, we call them pension contribution, is the city, through a legislative action, contributes to the Teachers Retirement Association. This is the same dollar amount that has been for several years and will continue for several more years. And then the last dollar amount is an additional bond redemption or bond debt service payment that is currently being used to pay the debt associated with the libraries from a referendum that was passed a number of years ago. Even though the county operates the libraries, part of the deal with the merger was for the city to continue levying to pay that debt. As that debt rolls off, we will be incurring new debt to pay for the new office building downtown. We've walked through some of the changes here, certainly more details on one-time spending. So I've given you some ongoing spending dollars, but the one-time meaning that just for 2019, and there are no tails at this point in time. I will highlight, again, economic inclusion. The mayor has mentioned in his speech about Village Trust Financial Cooperative. There's a $500,000 investment for the first Black-owned credit union that a number of people in the community are working hard towards opening in 2019, and there is a one-time of $500,000 for that endeavor. Also, major investments in climate and energy program as we move towards our reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, as well as the goal set by the City Council for 100% renewable energy by 2022. And then much of the affordable housing funding is coming out of tax increment financing, which is a special revenue fund of $15.1 million contribution to that amount. Property tax impacts, I know Mr. Qualley, who's very well qualified on property taxes, has independently created some property tax impacts. We also distribute property tax impacts to our city council members, and so we're going to share with you some basic overview of that. We tend to parse out the data a little differently than maybe Mr. Qualley, and so if you see some of those differences, certainly ask us questions. But Gina Powell from our budget office does a great job of running through these numbers and actually has a database of every parcel in the city and works through changes on some of this data, what I would call refinement, is that we'll highlight as we go through. Here's a history of the city's property tax levy overall. And again, that's including all of the previously mentioned levies, not just general fund, but all of the property tax levies. Also impacted, as we know, the property tax system is not necessarily always fair. And in some ways it's good to have a balance of different types of property because economic conditions change, but certainly apartments have seen increases. I know the council president highlighted this in a meeting earlier about the impact on renters because of apartment increases. Overall residential property, and just remember the definition of an apartment is 4 or more units in one building, and a residential could include a rental property that may be a single family home, or it could be a duplex or triplex or a quad. And then commercial and industrial. Industrial is not a very significant part of our tax base, but certainly has been growing as demand for buildings close to the core continues to increase.
And do you have a sense of how much of that growth is new construction versus valuation increases of existing, just roughly speaking?
Sure. I think overall, we highlight for the city, and I think commercial probably follows the trend. We see a less than, probably about 1.5% of the growth is new construction. The vast majority are increases related to inflation on existing buildings. I think we have seen because of what was, sure. Council President.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam President. I just wanted to highlight a piece of what we talked about earlier today in the budget presentation at Council, which is that in addition to all of the other factors, the way that our assessor's office is assessing property for residential apartment buildings or rental properties has 2 factors. One is that all renter properties in the city of Minneapolis pay a higher tax rate than owner-occupied buildings of every type. So a renter-occupied single-family home pays a higher tax rate than an owner-occupied single-family home, and everything up beyond that. And then the second piece is that the way that our assessor's office is assessing the value of existing apartment buildings is based on building sales. So when new construction occurs in a neighborhood and the rents in that building are higher than, or the assessed value of the properties are higher because they're new construction with much higher rents, it is almost certainly driving up the assessed value of the existing apartment buildings in those neighborhoods. And those are actually precisely the buildings that we are trying to preserve through our many attempts to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing. And so we talked about that a bit today. Earlier, there are state laws that impact how we do our assessments. There are standard practices within the assessment world, and I think our assessor's office is well regarded for the methodologies they use, and I'm not suggesting that they're doing anything wrong, but I think it's a place to examine where these trends may be at odds with our overall goal as a city of stabilizing housing and ensuring that renters are able to stay in their housing. So we talked about that a bit earlier. That was some more of the context. Thank you.
And I think the Council President highlights a fact that is also true for the commercial, which is Minneapolis actually, when you look around the metro area, commercial values have tended to stay pretty flat. There are certainly exceptions to that, Edina and maybe Woodbury, but other places have stayed pretty flat. But the city of Minneapolis commercial values have increased because of the sales, because large and small buildings are selling at very good rates because they are able to get the rents and because they are in a highly desirable area, and we have that same impact. And so the impact on smaller buildings as well as larger buildings are felt, and that's part of the reason we see this higher amount.
Mr. Wheeler.
The long-term change of residential property taxes have gone up very considerably, whereas commercial and others have gone down if you look at the last 20 years. And so there's a much larger burden on property taxes for residents in the city of Minneapolis than there used to be. And I think we lose track of the fact that it has changed very dramatically as LGA went down and some other kinds of things. And so anytime we realize people are paying much, much more on their property taxes, and I talk to people regularly where I work who say they love Minneapolis, but they can't stay here anymore because their property taxes went from $6,000 to $14,000 in the last 10 years. They literally say, when my son or daughter graduates from high school, we're out of here. We'll go to Richfield, or we're going to go to somewhere else. And I don't think that a lot of people have that long-term perspective to understand that there have been dramatic increases in property taxes. And so we need to be sure that when we do things, we do it in a way that is really fair to people. We don't want to have flight out of our city. And yet we want people to make good contributions because we offer more in Minneapolis than I can think of any other place in the state of Minnesota. I've lived in a bunch of them, and this is a great place. But we need to consider all of that, and it's significant stuff. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I will move along just in terms of some other history here in terms of what's happened with single-family homes. We have seen valuations go up and down over the last 17 years shown on this chart. That was certainly the impact of the recession, and you can see the lag of the recession. Typically for valuations of property for tax purposes, it tends to lag 2 or 3 years behind the beginning of a recession. And so you can see that the low point was 2012, 2013, and now we have seen substantial increases, and for single-family homes as well. And again, these are not equal increases. Every neighborhood sees differences in those increases, and the overall median is a 10% increase.
Mr. Ruff, has there been a map made of valuation changes? And if so, could I get a copy of it? Or could you give it to Jack, and then Jack could send it out so we could see that?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, and we have the assessor does a great job of breaking it out by not just ward, but also neighborhood. So.
Awesome. Have you done any mapping of taxation changes or just value changes?
Value changes
Okay,
at
thank
this
you.
point in time. We've talked a little bit about the market value increases. I would just continue. I mean, the board is aware of the Fiscal Disparities program. I won't go into detail, but that continues to Also then impact city tax base because we are sending more of our commercial tax base to the metro area for this program that has existed for over 40 years. And then also you will see in numbers that lower valued taxes for homestead properties tend to go up faster than higher value, and that's a function of a state program. I think it's important to mention that the council has very little control, as the council president mentioned, about how we value property and how we distribute taxes. It is a formula set by the state. And so this is one of the areas where the benefit of having a homesteaded property is you do pay less than a non-homesteaded property. The difficulty is that as your value increases, those market value benefits that are in the state program are not indexed, and so you will see a higher increase for lower valued homes. This is what was in the mayor's recommended budget breakdown. It was just generic overview of different types of properties at different levels. We chose the apartment and commercial. Those are medians, so you can still see that apartments, the median value is $667,000 in the city. That's still a rather low number when we think of very large apartment buildings. We still have a great number of smaller apartment buildings in the city, and the same is true for commercial. We have this is again it's mostly hitting smaller numbers of properties. A chart here that just shows the distribution. So we will have, basically 15% of property in the city that will see no increase in taxes, even with a 5.6% levy increase, because they had very little increase in their value. Whereas we have other properties that saw substantial increases in their values, and they will see an increase. And this is a sample of over 100,000 properties within the city for residential that excludes apartments. And we do exclude, like, if you have a condo building, you may have a garage that has a separate parcel. We've excluded those out of that. So when I talk about refining the data. So in closing, just a reminder, we mention this every time we can, that Mr. Wheeler mentioned about the impact of property taxes. The state is sympathetic to that increasing burden of property taxes, and for a long time has had funding that is a refund. It is not necessarily to help you write or pay for your property taxes in real time, but you can get a refund months later for both renters and homeowners. If you type in your search engine, just Department of Revenue property tax refund, you will see this website pop up, or there are paper copies or any place you can get tax forms that you can apply for this. And as I've mentioned before, I every year help my mother, who's on a fixed income and still owns her own townhome, to get some meaningful money. It's not tens of dollars, it's hundreds of dollars that can come back. And again, it's on a scale of your income and the value of your property. So with that, thank you for your attentiveness, and certainly happy to answer any questions as the evening progresses.
Any questions? Any questions? No?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Superintendent, I think you're up next. Yep. Park Board.
Good afternoon. It's still afternoon.
Close enough.
President Becker and members of the Board of Investment and Taxation. My name is Mary Merrill, and I'm the intern superintendent for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. And I'm here to present our request for the 2019 maximum property tax levy. One of the great things about the city of Minneapolis, of course, is its #1 park system. It's been rated that way for the past 6 years formally by the Trust for Public Land. But even before that, we have a long history in this city for incredible parks. I think it started back in 1883 when the Park Board was created. And the people of the city of Minneapolis determined that they wanted to invest in parkland, and that has continued throughout the years of our investment in the neighborhood park system, the river, and we're still continuing that. We have kind of an unfinished agenda. But We know that Minneapolis is a world-class city, and it is a world-class city because it has a world-class park system. We believe that parks provide places and recreational opportunities for all people to gather, to celebrate, to contemplate, be by yourself with nature, to be with your friends, and engage in all activities that promote health, well-being, community, and the environment. So our 2019 maximum tax levy request basically is a request that maintains the Park Board's current service level, but it also provides for small increases for youth programming and services. One of the things when I came back as interim superintendent that I kept hearing from legislators, from council members and others is, what are you doing for youth? We've got to have more programs for youth. And what we have discovered is that, and we'll go into it more in depth in the presentation, is that we have kind of been over the years disinvesting in our young people, and it's really showing in some of the issues that we have in our city. So we think we need to begin the process of reinvesting in our youth, and so that will be part of our presentation today. So with that, I'm going to ask Julie Weisman to come up and do the actual presentation of the budget, and then we'll be back up to talk a little bit more at the end about some of the youth initiatives. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, President Becker and members of the BET. I'm Julie Weisman. I'm the Finance Director of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Our presentation is going to be a little bit different than the City of Minneapolis. The superintendent presents her recommended budget to our board on October the 17th. Because we are so intertwined with the City of Minneapolis and the BET, we do not present our recommended budget until we have the information from the city and as well as the BET. So what I'm going to provide to you is some budget history and then what our projections are over the next 5 years. So for our general fund, property taxes have increased an average of 4.1% annually over the past 10 years. And you'll see in 2012 and 2014, our general fund levy was 0%. And then when the tree forestation levy came in 2014, and the neighborhood 20-year neighborhood park plan was implemented in 2017, are where we have some of our bigger increases. Local government aid for the park board is the same as the City of Minneapolis. We saw large decreases in local government aid during the economic downturn. The local government aid has started to trend upward, but it is not anywhere near the amounts that we received in the past. And then our general fund other revenues are license fees, grants, and our fines and our service fees and other revenues. So if you look at our general fund by major sources, the park board is heavily reliant on property taxes, with 74% of our general fund funded through that one source. Local government aid is 12%, and then the other revenues is 14%. On the operating expenditure side, over the past 10 years, we have increased about 3.9% annually. And if you look at our operating expenditures between 2009 to 2018, the pieces of the pie are very similar, but we have less employees, but we have also improved our investments, just as the city has with their internal service funds. There was a lot of disinvestment in both mobile equipment and our information technology services. So expenses in those areas have increased over time as we have right-sized those programs. So as we go forward, the things, again, that impact the park board's budget is obviously state legislation. So we watch the state legislation with the local government aid, and then also on the capital side. And then we also
Can I break
watch.
in? So,
Pardon?
I see $1 million for inspection of the Stone Arch Bridge. Does the park board own the Stone Arch Bridge? I thought the county owned the Stone Arch Bridge.
Yeah, the county does, but we operate the bridge.
So do you have a contract with the county, or, I know I'm just wondering why that would be our financial responsibility and not the county's.
I can't answer the question
That's fine.
on what the written
Yeah.
agreement, and we can get back to you on that.
That's great.
We have a vested interest in the Stone Arch Bridge because of our trail,
Yeah.
our connections, and the operating of the site. So it's not necessarily that we are financially responsible for it,
Okay.
but it is something that we lobby for, and it's something that
Okay.
we keep a close eye on.
President Becker, the 1 million for the inspection of the Stone Arch Bridge was thank you, President Becker. The $1 million for the Stone Arch Bridge was part of the legislative bonding package this year, so it's not part of municipal. It's not part of municipal funds.
I understand. I just wanted to know if we were responsible for a large stone bridge or not.
Remains to be seen.
I may be out of my league, but my understanding is actually the state of Minnesota owns the bridge, and that the park board owns the trail that goes on the top of the bridge. So there is a partnership there.
Okay.
But the state recognizes that it is their financial burden to take on the majority of that, and the $1 million was essentially a down payment on what is hoped for as additional capital improvements provided by future state bonding, if that matches everybody's understanding.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's good to know.
It's a big old bridge.
Yeah. So on the city side, on the city update side, they talked about the Murph legislation changes. The impact to the park board is the general fund impact is levied through the city's levy for their pension levy. We are responsible for our enterprise fund and our internal service funds. So those two funds get impacted where the city charges us to pay them back for the amount that they pay into the state. We also look at the mayor's recommended budget and his 5-year financial projection, which calls for a 4% property tax levy increase in those years are wrong. It's 2020 to 2024. We also have impacts from the city when the city passes ordinances for the minimum wage and the safe and sick time. That also has impacts to the park board, as we have many, as a seasonal operation, we have many part-time staff who fall in that. So you can see over the phased-in approach for the minimum wage, our general fund is being impacted by just over $2 million. So we have built that into our projections, and we have built that into our maximum property tax levy request. So our general fund projections, when we look at 2019, to maintain our current service level, we are needing to raise our general fund property tax by 5.4%. Our local government aid is staying pretty constant, and we are staying constant with our other fines and other revenues. We also have the tree preservation and reforestation levy. That is an 8-year program that was implemented to deal with emerald ash borer and the removal of the public ash trees. So not private ash trees, the public ash trees, so the street trees and also the park board trees. We also actually are involved in removal of private property emerald ash borer ash trees, but that's through the special assessment process and through our forestry inspection process. You also should have received.
Did I understand there's going to be no money spent a few years down the line on the tree piece? Is that what I see?
So This is an 8-year program, so at
Just-
the end of the 8 years, all the public ash trees will have been removed.
But there's still considerable money being put into trees for other sorts of things as.
That
as
is correct.
Just the special one. Okay,
This
thank
is just the special levy.
Appreciate that, thanks.
This was a special levy that we adopted just for the purpose of the ash trees. And once the ash trees are gone, then the need to continue to cut them down is gone. And replace them, I
And
should
those
say.
ash borers are going to go somewhere else.
Well, they won't have ash trees to eat.
You also have before you the Park Board's 2018 to 2023 capital improvement program and matrix. So this, of course, is the NPP $20 along with the dollars that we had prior to NPP 20. And then we also show the regional funding sources and how those split out between capital investments and rehab. And I do have a note down at the bottom for MPP 20 for the Park Board's capital side. We are going to be going through a negotiation with the city once every 5 years to determine the inflationary factor for the next 5 years. So we do not get an annual increase to our MPP $20 on our side like the streets.
The Metropolitan Council twice and that isn't paying anything. What's all that about?
Metropolitan Council is on a biennial.
All right.
So we have the 1 year and then the out year. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mary.
Right, as I mentioned in my introduction, this whole issue around reinvesting in our youth, I think the mayor in his budget put in dollars for something called the wraparound school concept. And there were a number of people that were here to testify and talk about the benefits of that program. I've been around long enough to know that this isn't the first time we recognize the importance of agency cooperation between the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board and the school board. That we both were the two major agencies who serve youth in the city of Minneapolis, and so it makes sense in terms of really making the best use of our property tax dollars that we both have to benefit citizens and in particular to benefit our children. So this wraparound school concept is something that we welcome. We've begun conversation with the school board, and we really believe that this is the beginning of, again, sort of re-advancing what we used to call shared use facilities, now wraparound concept, and really looking at the whole child, figuring out how we can make sure that our young people in the city of Minneapolis grow up in an environment that allows them to become great citizens. And so in addition to that, we know that over the last 10 years, there's been a disinvestment in youth, not only from a government side, but really from a number of public, semi-private organizations and agencies. They've all been down funding youth activities for a variety of reasons. There have been other things that I think they've moved on to. That disinvestment, I think, is showing up in our streets. It's showing up in what's happening with our young people across the city of Minneapolis. And so as I said earlier, as we've talked with other elected officials, other branches of government, this area that they feel is an important area for parks around youth. They've been asking, what are you doing? What's happening with the youth? How are you investing in your youth programming? And so we're looking at about $100,000, really pretty much a down payment to talk about how we begin the reinvestment in youth in programs like Street Reach that go out and reach kids who are really actively engaged in difficult situations, like Youth Line that goes out and extends a line to young people. And that particular program, Youth Line, used to have about, 15, 16 youth outreach workers. It now has, they have 3 that serve full-time in certain centers, but the other 10 people do double duty and they have two centers that they are supposed to work with. So we really need to focus on how do we get back that investment in our youth and really make the difference in our city. So I would say this, we are grateful for MPP 20. We are very grateful for that reinvestment of dollars that I know you all worked very, very hard to make it happen. And it was really needed. Our facilities were beginning to fall apart. And in fact, this summer, there are a number of waiting pools and pools that are down because we just haven't made those investments over the years. So I would say that that was great. We're beginning the process of reinvigorating our facilities and our infrastructure across the city, but it doesn't address the human side, the people side, the recreation side. And so we need to really look at that. And we think this year we're turning our attention to the recreation side, and we're asking for a small down payment to really look at what we can do to make sure that our young people in the city of Minneapolis have the opportunities that they need. These young people are faced with many challenges beyond gangs, homelessness, health-related issues, and really need that affiliation with the parks. I would say one last thing about our youth investment. I guess I should. You already did it for me. Thank you. We know that people who are here, coming here, who may be an immigrant, one of the things that they're asking for us for also is programming, so that we can connect with their children who have a lot of challenges being in the new environment and making the right connections. So we hope that you will support our request for a small investment. The mayor's request for $150,000 for wraparound schools, and our additional request for $100,000 to really begin the process of reinvesting in our youth. Okay, Julie. Go ahead.
Yep. So just in closing, we have provided with you a certified copy of our board resolution that was unanimously approved last Wednesday night. And I'd have to say that when we first started our budget discussions, there was a very wide range of appetite for, what we should be presenting to you this evening. So I believe having a unanimously adopted resolution is a testament to the hard work that this board has done already and what the superintendent and the executive team and staff have done already. And so you will see our current service level of the 5.4% for our general fund, and the 3% for the tree preservation reforestation levy, and then the additional $250,000 that we're asking for youth investment, for a maximum property tax levy of $65.7 million or 5.7%. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Wheeler.
I worked for the YMCA for many years, which is probably one of the largest youth organizations in the country, and the Y is very active here. The North Community Y has done some amazing outreach and work in the community, and I'm a huge believer in partnerships. But when somebody else is doing that really good work, I really hope we explore working with them as well, because it isn't just schools and government. There actually are a lot of nonprofits out there that are doing some absolutely amazing work. And the more partnerships we build and the more connections we build throughout the community, the healthier our community is going to be. I don't have any more to say than that, but I really believe it. I lived it. I was a YMCA camp counselor for years. It's great stuff. Anyway, enough.
Just a quick response. Absolutely. We are going to have to collaborate across all kinds of lines in our city if we're going to meet the challenges that we're being faced with. So I absolutely agree with you that, and one of the things about this wraparound school concept is that idea that we're all going to come together, collaborate, not just parks and schools, but other social service agencies, other health institutions, to really serve the whole child.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Anything? Thank you.
All right, check. Item E. We have information from staff.
Yes, I have a couple handouts. The one handout that has a yellow line across it. The important thing here is that local tax capacity increased to 11.55%, which is significantly. You turn to the second page, and
Mr. Qualley, I don't know that we have the handouts that you're speaking of.
yeah, I passed it out to you. It's in your
It looked
packet.
like,
Sorry, too many, lots of paper here.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then on the second page is with regards to the distribution of tax burden, there's nothing the city council or the park board or the board of estimate can do with what I would term the unequal distribution of tax burden. That's the complete function of the state statutes and that. And regardless of the level of overall taxes, the unequal distribution of the burden is going to be there. Late this fall, after the truth and taxation statements come out, I'll be able to get a map from the county that shows both the county and also a city map that shows property taxes increases within neighborhoods and things of that. That'll be in mid-November, late November. And that's based on the truth and taxation data. This page shows that for taxes payable in 2019, it's based on the values from January 2nd of 2018. So there's the lag there. And this shows the median value home and going up approximately 10.2%. And this is just what I call the city taxes per se. It doesn't include the TRA levy. And the reason this page doesn't include the TRA levy is when the TNT statements go out or when the tax statements go out, the Teachers Retirement Association is what's termed a special levy. So it falls down in the bottom of the tax statement rather than under the city line. And you can see also that the homestead exclusion or market value exclusion, which is a benefit to homes basically from 80,000, it phases out approximately 413,000 though. But just because your value is going up, your market value exclusion is decreasing too. So there's a bigger impact there. So you can see that the value went up 10.2%, but the homestead exclusion went down 12%. So your taxable market value went up approximately 12%. And what I call just the city taxes, this is homesteaded property, will go up 7.1%. Now the second page has the TRA levy in it, and this is the number you will see in the budget book. Down in the lower right-hand corner, it says $1,387, and that's approximately a 7.1% increase. That includes the TRA levy, and this is the page that corresponds to the budget book page. The other thing about the homestead exclusion is it doesn't apply to non-homesteaded property. So the third page is a non-homesteaded property, and you can see the rate of change is less than on homestead property. Now their taxes are more, $1,462 compared to $1,378, but the rate of change is 5.4% compared to 7.1%. So the rate of changes on non-homesteaded property is less than on homesteaded property. Also, the classification rate set by the state, once you hit 500,000, the classification rate goes up. So the further you are over 500,000, the bigger impact you have, obviously. Okay. The second handout is a slightly different sample than what the budget office uses. And what I use is basically homesteaded properties that haven't had improvement or permits drawn like in the last 4 years, because one would expect if you had a permit drawn for, remodeling, your value would increase. So if your taxes increase, some of it obviously is related to that improvement increase. So what I'm looking at from year to year, basically, it's just property that hasn't had improvements in the last 4 years per permit. So it's all market value and tax burden driven. And the first page shows you the estimated market value changes, which is the starting point for taxing. The second page is the tax capacity changes. And then the third page is the estimated city tax changes. And you can see on the third page, approximately 15.8% of the properties are going to have tax decreases. The other 84% will have tax increases depending upon the categories. The largest categories, basically 0 to 3%, approximately 7,200 parcels, that's about 14% of the sample, or 52,000 parcels. 3 to 5%, 9,000 parcels. And then, 5 to 7.5, 8,200 parcels, 15%. And so these tax burdens are driven not only by the value changes, they're driven by the classification rates set by the state, which the cities held hostage to, basically. So I just wanted you to understand that.
Okay.
A little bit more, when the people get their T&T statement in November, they'll look at the tax rate changes. And if I own a median value house, my tax rate changes is going to be higher than someone else has a median value house, doesn't live there, doesn't, not, and that, but they end up paying more, but my rate of change is, and that's what generates all the response when we come to December, and you'll see much more highly class or a number of people here testifying with their T&T statements in hand. So,
all right. Thank you. All right. Gotta find my agenda here. No one else has signed up to speak, so going once, going twice. I close the public hearing. Do we have any direction to staff? Anyone have direction to staff? And we
historically, what staff does for the next meeting, which we'll set the maximums at, is we draft the resolutions based on the mayor's budget. Usually the chair Ways and Means or the president of the council introduces that, and that's the starting point from there. So that.
All right.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Any other business before the board? Any other business? Any other business? Motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
If you're opposed, you're sneaking out. Thank you. Give Jack his pen back.
Oh, that's good.